All right, Joe, we'll say good morning. Let us begin. I want to begin by thanking our sponsor, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Teves. To thank Yoel Sara Kelman for dedicating all the shiurim and droshos this month in honor of the birth of their daughter, Oriya Tahel, and in the hope and the merit of the tefilos of all those, anyway, merit Hashem, and in the hope that the tefilos of all those davening for this special bracha will soon be answered. To thank Steve and Teri Czinn for dedicating all the Sherman Drushos this month in honor of their grandchildren, Adin, Tzvi, and Naftali, Moshe, and Shirley Elbaum Family for dedicating the shiurim this month, the commemoration of the yahrzeit of Gerald Elbaum, Yaakov Kopel, Ben R Avraham Menachem. To thank our week of learning sponsors, Paul and Kathy Pollack in memory of Paul's sister Leah bas Shmuel. Our Daf Yomi sponsors, Steve Goloskov in commemoration of the shloshim of his father Nachum Sender ben Meshulim Zichron Livracha, and David and Roberta Schwartz in honor and in memory of the 1-year yarzheit of David's father Efraim Shimon ben Avram Zichron Livracha. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliya, and the families a neshama, and we thank everyone for their sponsorships. So with that, let us begin. We have a lot to do today, Meretz Hashem. Today's daf is Daf Hey. 5. We are picking up on Daled Amud Beis. Let's just, for the sake of ease, just pick up at the beginning of the intermediate wide lines. So the Gemara says, my Rebbe Yossi. Supposed to remember again, the Gemara said in yesterday's daf that the Mishnah could reflect the view of Rebbe or Rabbi Yossi. So we went through Rebbe's position. Now the Gemara says, what's the position of Rabbi Yossi? Disanyo, we learned, Chalios be'erev Shabbos, if the 14th falls out on Erev Shabbos, on Friday, Mukafin ukfarim makdim li'maknisa. So in that case, according to this opinion, Mukafin walled cities and villages will advance to Thursday. So we began this opinion yesterday, this interesting idea that once walled cities are going to have to move anyway, because you can't read on Shabbos, and you can't push until Sunday, because Sunday will already be the 16th, so you might as well move back Mukafin to read together with Kfarim on the 13th, on Thursday, which is the Yom HaKnisa. So the Gemara says, and again, large unwalled cities will read on the 14th, on Friday. Rabbi Yossi says, no. We don't push back walled cities to the 13th before the unwalled cities. Rather, Rabbi Yossi will say, which is the view reflected in our Mishnah, namely that halacha l'maisa, when the 14th falls on a Friday, so ultimately again, unwalled cities and walled cities will both read on Friday, and villages will be pushed back to Thursday. So the Gemara analyzes, my time at the Tanakama, what's the logic of the Tanakama? Remember, again, this is a very novel idea, that once we have to move the walled cities, we move them back to Thursday together with the villages. Where does the Tanakama get that? So the Gemara says, Dichsiv, b'chol shana v'shana. Because the pasuk in the Megillah says each and every year, which means that the observance of Purim should be uniform from year to year. Ma kol shana v'shana ayaros ba'arba'asar uzmana shel zeh uzmana shel zeh. Just like each and every year, unwalled cities read on the 14th, and what? And the date for reading of the unwalled cities is different than the walled cities. Afkan ayaros ba'arba'asar. So too I will say we will preserve the reading of the unwalled cities on the 14th, and in order to ensure that walled cities and unwalled cities do not read at the same time, what will we do? So the Gemara says, Uzmano shalzeh, Afkan ayaros ba'arba'asar, Uzmano shalzeh, lo Uzmano shalzeh. Therefore we'll push the walled cities back to Thursday the 13th. Ay ve'imo, v'chol shana v'shana. Why don't you dash in the pasuk a little bit differently, and to say as follows, Ma kol shana v'shana in mukafin kol min la'ayaros. Just like each and every year, walled cities don't come before unwalled cities. Afkan ein mukafin kol min la'ayaros. So too over here, we're not going to push walled cities before unwalled cities. Shiny hacha de lo efshar. Here I will say, remember again, it's not possible. It's not possible. Already as it is, you're not going to maintain the order of unwalled cities before walled cities. Why not? Because the 15th is on Shabbos. So already as it is, what are your two options? Your two options are either read both, or I should say, allow both to read on the 14th on Friday, right? In which case, again, you already ruined the order, or push walled cities to the 13th, to Thursday. Because even though that seems a little bit unnatural, at least what you're doing is you're preserving the unique aspect of the 14th. So therefore, again, the Tanakama would rather preserve the uniqueness of the 14th, making it a day that only unwalled cities read, even if that means going ahead and pushing walled cities to Thursday the 13th. So the Gemara says, my time with Rabbi Yossi. What's Rabbi Yossi's logic? Remember again, Rabbi Yossi holds that when the 15th falls on a Shabbos, so what are we going to do? We'll go ahead and when the 14th falls on Erev Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi will say, because we'll say, remember, by the way, you begin to see from this discussion, which is very interesting, that as much as the 14th and 15th are, actually, let's save it for later. So we'll say, so when the 14th falls out on Erev Shabbos, so Rabbi Yossi holds that both walled and unwalled will read on the 14th on Friday, and villages will be pushed to the previous Thursday. So the Gemara wrote Rabbi Yossi's logic. My time to Rabbi Yossi, B'chol shana v'shana, because once again Rabbi Yossi also darshans the same phrase. B'chol shana v'shana, ma kol shana v'shana, ein mukafin kobmin la'ayaros, just like each and every year, ein mukafin kobmin la'ayaros, that ultimately again, walled cities do not come before unwalled cities. Afkan, ein mukafin kobmin la'ayaros. So too over here, you can't push walled cities before you can't push walled cities to read before unwalled cities. Ve'ema, both say second wide line. Ve'ema of the widest lines. Ve'ema, b'chol shana v'shana, ma b'chol shana v'shana, zmano shel zeh, lo zmano shel zeh, afkan, zmano shel zeh, lo zmano shel zeh. But Rabbi Yossi, why don't you say b'chol shana v'shana, each and every year, right? Walled cities and unwalled cities do not read on the same dates. So why not preserve that same thing over here? To which the Gemara says, "Shani hachad lo afshar." It's different. I will say, because remember again, you're dealing with a compromised. You're dealing already with a difficult case. What's the difficult case? The 15th is falling out on Shabbos. So once the 15th is falling out on Shabbos, what does that tell you? Something's going to give. So we'll say, you see an interesting tension over here. And by the way, what an incredible musar also. You see, what's unfolding over here is as follows. When the 15th falls out on Shabbos, what do you lack? Perfection. In other words, when the 15th falls out on Shabbos, here's what I know. I can't have things in a perfect order, right? In a perfect world, unwalled cities read on the 14th, right? Walled cities read on the 15th. Villages, okay, whatever, either the 14th, Yom HaKnisa, whatever it is. So when the 15th falls out on Shabbos, it's an quote-unquote, an imperfect situation. So you know what the machlokis is over here? When you find yourself beset by the imperfections of life, you have to learn how to pivot, right? You see, there are different kinds of people. Some people, when they find themselves in the midst of imperfect circumstances, simply go ahead and lament the imperfection of their circumstances. Woe is me, right? I can't believe this is happening. And they spend all of their energies lamenting the imperfections. Chazal are teaching us life is filled with imperfect circumstances. Some are dramatically imperfect, some are a bit less dramatic, like when the 15th of Adar falls out on Shabbos. But either way, Lemaisa, it's quote-unquote an imperfection. You can't do things as you would like to do them. So what do you have to do? Pivot. The machlokes, interestingly enough, between Rabbi Yossi and Tanakama, is how do you pivot, right? Everyone's agreeing a pivot is necessary. When you find yourself in less than optimal circumstances, you need to figure out how to do things differently. That's the yesod in life. The machlokes is, how do you do it differently? Rabbi Yossi and the Tanakama have different opinions, ultimately, again, as to what that pivot should look like. Such an incredible musar haskell, because isn't this each and every day of life? Less than optimal circumstances present themselves. Two kinds of people: those who lament and ultimately give up, or those who pivot and find a new way forward. Incredible. So the Gemara says, V'savra Rebbe, Ayoros lo dachin liyom haknisa. So I'll say, does Rebbe hold, this was in yesterday's daf, does Rebbe hold that cities are never pushed to the Yom HaKnisa? About time we learned, this is an interesting case, Chalios b'Shabbos, if the 14th falls down on Shabbos, Kfarim makdima liyom HaKnisa. So remember again, villages will go to the previous Thursday, which also would be the 12th, Va'ayoros gidolos korim be'erev Shabbos, and large unwalled cities will read on Friday the 13th, umukafos chol lemachar, and walled cities will read on Sunday, which is in actuality the 15th. Rebbe says, Omer ani, I say, hoil, v'nitchu ayaros mimkomon yitchu liyom haknisa. Rebbe holds, listen, once you're already moving cities, you might as well move them to Thursday to the Yom HaKnisa. So the Gemara says, Hachi hashta hasam. So you see from there that Rebbe does hold that cities could even be moved to the Yom HaKnisa. To which the Gemara says, no, that's not a fair case. Hachi hashta hasam zmanam Shabbasi. V'hoel v'nitchu yitchu. But say there's a little bit different. Why? Because remember, you're talking about a case where the 14th is falling out on Shabbos, right? The 14th is falling out on Shabbos. Once the 14th is falling out on Shabbos, and you have to move the cities anyway, there's logic to say that perhaps once they're not reading on their actual date, put them on Thursdays so that at least the whole unwalled chevra, right, which is large cities and villages, are all reading together. V'hacha zmanam erev Shabbos. But here in this case, there's zman, the 14th is erev Shabbos. In other words, when the 14th is a feasible day, we go with the 14th. Okay, Rebbe holds once the 14th is not feasible and you have to move them anyway, move them to Thursday. Now, it happens to be, we don't paskin like that, right? In other words, halacha l'maisa for us, when the 14th falls out on on Shabbos, we're going to have to push the cities earlier, but we don't automatically push the unwalled cities to Thursday. We push them instead until when? Until Friday, like we just saw before. So the Gemara says, Kiman azla hada amrabi chelbo amrav huna. Whose opinion is reflected in the following statement? Purim shchalios b'Shabbos. When Purim falls down on Shabbos. So also when we speak about Purim falling down on Shabbos, that means Yudalid. The 14th of Adar falls out on Shabbos. So what's the halacha? Hakol nitchin liyom haknisa. Everyone ultimately again is pushed to Thursday. So the Gemara says, Hakol nitchin sakadetcha. Does Hakol mean everyone? V'ha'ika mukafin da'avdi l'machar. First of all, it's not even a true statement. Because let's remember again, when the 14th falls out on Shabbos, remember, not everybody's pushed to the Yom HaKnisa, because remember, who do you have? The walled cities. And one of the walled cities reading Sunday, the 15th. Ela kol hanidcha yitchel Yom HaKnisa. Rather, what it means is, whoever has a reading that is going to be pushed off should be pushed to the previous Thursday. Kiman, whose opinion does this reflect? Kirebi. Ultimately, again, like Rebbe, because we will say Rebbe is of the opinion, and we don't accept this min halacha l'maisa, but Rebbe is of the opinion that when the 14th falls out on Shabbos, and you're going to have to push the unwalled cities anyway to a date that is not their natural date, you might as well, what? Push everyone to Thursday. Since at least, again, the entire unwalled cohort could go ahead and read together like that. So again, I'll say that is the position of Rebbe. Again, we don't paskin like that, but halacha l'maisa, it is a position. Good, let's go weiter. Says the Gemara. What do you see from here? Megillah b'Shabbos looking at it. But we'll say, what is clear, by the way, is everyone agrees with the following concept, which is Megillah is not read on Shabbos. Right? Here's what's interesting. So everyone is agreeing that when the 14th falls out on Shabbos, you are going to have to move the unwalled cities to a different date. Okay, machlokes, is it going to be Friday? Is it going to be Thursday? But everyone is agreeing that halacha l'maisa, no Megillah on Shabbos. So says the Gemara, why not? My time, Shabbos said, this is a famous Gzeira de Rabba. Omer Rabba, hakolchem b'kriyas Megillah. Rabba says like this. I'll tell you why. Because everyone is obligated in the reading of the Megillah. Ve'ein hakol b'kiyin b'mikra Megillah. Rabba says, yet, but not everyone is skilled in the reading of the Megillah. Gzeira shemi yitlena b'yada v'yelech etzel baki lomod v'ya'avirena arba amos b'rshus harabim. And I will say, what are we concerned about? Because everyone has to read the Megillah, but because not everyone knows how to read the Megillah, the concern is one is going to end up carrying the Megillah Dalit Amis in Rishus Harabim, and may inadvertently perform an act of hotzah. Therefore, in order to avoid this, we say don't read the Megillah on Shabbos. And Abosai says the Gemara behind time of the lulav. Behind the time of the lulav. Behind the time of the shofar. Behind the time of the lulav. And Abosai, this is the same reason we don't blow shofar on Shabbos, and the same reason we don't take lulav and esrog on Shabbos, out of a concern that Allah Lamaisa one may come to carry. Incredible. So we'll say that's our first opinion, which we've seen this already in Tainus, we've actually seen it in Yuma and in Sukkah as well. Rabbi Yosef says, listen to this is incredible. No, now we'll say Tosfos points out that Rabbi Yosef is not arguing on Rabbah. He's not disagreeing. He's adding in another dimension. What's another reason not to read Megillah on Shabbos? Listen to this. Rabbi Yosef Amar, Mipnei she'eineihem shel aniyim nesuos b'mikra. There's another reason. What's the other reason I will say? When you read the Megillah, we read about the mitzvah of matanos le'evyonim. So when you read the Megillah, the eyes of the aniyim are opened, expecting to receive tzedakah, expecting to receive charity. Look at Rashi. Nesuos l'mikra Megillah, l'kabel matanos evyonim v'efshar b'Shabbos. They will say, isn't this absolutely incredible? Rabbi Yosef says, when we read the Megillah, the Aniyim are expecting to receive Matanos Lavyonim, because that's what the Megillah says. And if you read the Megillah on Shabbos, it's going to create false expectations. Then I will say, now this is an incredible yesod if you think about it, which is, well, the Aniyim are also Shomer Shabbos, presumably, right? If the Aniyim are reading the Megillah, the Aniyim also know on Shabbos, right? Mitchila. In other words, what do you mean? It sounds like the Gemara says that Rabbi Yosef says that you're going to read the Megillah, the Aniyim are going to hear all about Matanos Lavyonim, they're going to get all excited, and then after Megillah is over and they don't get Matanos Lavyonim, their hopes are going to be dashed. What are you talking about? The Matanos Lavyonim also, Aniyim also know they don't get tzedakah on Shabbos. Everyone knows you don't get tzedakah on Shabbos. You can't handle money on Shabbos. So what's the pshat? We'll say, but you see something absolutely amazing over. Rabbi Yosef is saying is like this. You see, when you read the Megillah, and the Aniyim see that hope, that salvation, that Yeshua is on the way, it builds their hope. It builds their hope. They know that they're not getting money on Shabbos, right? Everyone knows you're not handling money on Shabbos. But when the ani, I will say, but sometimes when a person is an ani, sometimes the most difficult part of being an ani is a lack of hope, is a lack of optimism. Mi'ayin Yeshuasi ba, like where is salvation going to come from? How am I going to get out of this? And then you read the Megillah, and you realize, wow, there's a lifeline. There's a lifeline. And I will say, the ani knows that no one's giving him money on Shabbos. But Rav Yosef says, don't go ahead and create inflated hopes only to dash them in the next moment. In other words, I will say, sometimes the worst thing you could do is overpromise and underdeliver. Overpromise, because why? Because you build up people's hopes and expectations that some type of respite from their difficulty is going to come. Therefore, says Rav Yosef, don't read the Megillah on Shabbos. Now again, Tosfos points out, once again, Rav Yosef is not arguing with Rabbah. Everyone agrees with the Gzer of Rabbah, but Rav Yosef says there's an additional piece that applies here by Mikra Megillah. Don't build people up, or don't build up hopes if you are going to be unable to deliver. I will say, such an incredible yesod, and how sensitive we have to be to the plight of the ani, and how sensitive we have to be to the individual who is lacking. I will say this is true in I've mentioned this in a different context, that sometimes we're not careful the way we speak about our brachos. We're not careful to speak about our brachos, right? Whatever the bracha is, whether it's the bracha of parnasa, whether it's the bracha of children, right? Whether it's the bracha of marriage, we talk about these brachos, and we don't realize sometimes the people who we're talking to don't have these brachos. They may not have these brachas, and how careful I have to be that ultimately in talking of my bracha, I don't accentuate or amplify the pain of someone who doesn't have that particular bracha. So Rav Yosef says, you can't read Megillah on Shabbos, because you're going to talk about the fact that we have an obligation to take care of each other, to support one another, and then you're going to go home and the ani doesn't get that support. That just amplifies his pain, that he doesn't have what he needs. And if by reading the Megillah is going to amplify the pain of the ani, don't read it. Rabbi say, isn't that incredible? How sensitive and how careful we have to be with that. Rabbi Yosef would say, I would sooner not read the Megillah on Shabbos, sooner not observe Purim on Shabbos, than run the risk of amplifying the pain of another Jew. That's how sensitive we have to be with each other. Absolutely incredible. So Gemara says, that supports this. Even though we say that villages advance their reading to the Yom HaKnisa, Govin bo bayom, umechalkin bo bayom. We go ahead and we collect money on the day, right? Rabbi says it sounds like on the day that we read, and we distribute matos on the day that we read. So the Gemara says, Afa pisha amru adra mishum sha'amru, mishum da amru. Elo, you're right. Hoil va'amru shekfarim makdim liyom haknisa govin bo bayom umechalkin bo bayom mipnei she'eneim shalaniyim nesos. Rabbi said there's a very interesting halacha. What the Gemara is saying over here is as follows. Rabbi said we're not going to get into an interesting discussion for a few moments like this. You see, what we've been discussing this entire time is advancing the reading of the Megillah. The interesting question so sometimes we automatically assume that when we're advancing the reading of the Megillah, what else are we doing? Advancing the observance of Purim. And we're going to see that's not necessarily the case. In other words, you could have a situation where we're going to advance the reading of the Megillah, but the actual celebration of Purim will occur on its natural calendrical date. Or, right, so what the Gemara is saying over here is as follows. When we talk about the fact that the villages advance the reading of the Megillah, the Gemara says, by the way, what else are you going to do on that day? You're also going to distribute matanos le'avyonim. Right? Even though it's quite possible that although the villages are going to go ahead and advance their reading, they're not going to celebrate Purim until when? Until the 14th. So they're going to have their su'udah and shalach manos on the 14th. But what's interesting, the Gemara says, is matanos le'avyonim always follows the date of the reading. Why? Exactly this reason. Because they're both saying, because matanos le'avyonim always has to be tethered to the reading, because the poor will hear that there's an obligation to go ahead and distribute matanos le'avyonim. They'll hear through Megillah. Therefore, again, whenever we read, we have to distribute matanos le'avyonim. It might be the rest of the observance of Purim is going to take place on a different date. But matanos le'avyonim is always tethered to the reading of the Megillah, because the aniyim are acutely aware of the performance of this mitzvah when they pay attention to the Megillah. So incredible. So the Gemara says, Aval, top of hay, Aval simcha, eino nohagias ela bizmana. But we just said before, simcha, what is simcha? Simcha is su'udah, the mitzvah to have a celebratory meal, and what? As well as mishlach manos, because we also remember again, shalach manos is connected to the mitzvah of su'udah. Those only take place on their natural calendrical date. Incredible. I'll say more about that in a bit. So the Gemara says, Amrav, Megillah bizmana, korno safi l'biyachid, shlo bizmana ba'asara. What's interesting? Rav says that when you read Megillah on the natural date, right, the natural date, so whatever we'll call it, walled cities on the 15th, unwalled cities on the 14th, you could read it even without a minyan. But halacha l'maisa, if you're reading it not on the natural date, by definition, you require a minyan. Ravasi says no. Ben bizmana, ben shelo bizmana basar. Ravasi says no. Whether you're reading Megillah on the correct date or on a deferred date, you always need a minyan. Rabbi say, hey, I'm the 4 lines down. What's the logic, Rabbi say? The logic is, interesting enough, remember, what Rav seems to say is like this. When you're reading on the natural, see, Rabbi say, we're going to see that by Mikra Megillah, there is an important yesod of Birov Am Hadras Melech. Birov Am Hadras Melech. Which means that again, the name of the king is glorified within the multitudes. The idea being that we should really go ahead and read Megillah in as large of a group as possible. So Rav will say like this is fascinating. Bismana, so let's say on the 14th of Adar, everyone's reading Megillah. So because everyone's reading Megillah, by definition, the Birov Am is accomplished just by the fact that we're all doing the same mitzvah. Even if what? We're not all doing it together. However, shelo bizmano, when it's not the natural date, when it's a deferred date, 11, 12, 13, that you need to really create a situational berovam. You need to get a large group of people together. Whereas Ravasi says, no, Berovam always means getting a lot of people in one location. Doesn't matter again, bismana, shalo, bismana. So it says, Hava Ovda, one time it happened, and how does it happen that they're reading the Megillah, not on what we'll call the natural date. V'chosh Rav lahad Ravasi. And Rav went out to get a minyan, right? So Rav went out to get a minyan. I'm sorry, just the opposite. It happened one time that they're reading the Megillah on the correct date, and Rav still went out of his way to go ahead and get a minyan. So you see, at the end of the day, Rav came around to Ravasi, and said, ideally, one should always have a minyan. Says the Gemara, V'hamar Rav Yehuda bar Rav Shmuel, bar Shilas Ushei Rav, Purim Shechalios b'Shabbos, Purim Shechalios b'Erev Shabbos, Purim Shechalios b'Shabbos, Erev Shabbos. So the Gemara says, Erev Shabbos Zmanom. So the Gemara says, and Erev Shabbos is the right time to read the Megillah. Erev Shabbos Zmanom, really? Erev Shabbos is their time. For Shabbos Zmanom. But Shabbos is the correct time, to which the Gemara says, El Lav Hakim, what it means to say, Shalo Bizmanom, Kizmanom. It means ultimately, again, not in their time is like their time. How so? Mas manam afilu biyachid. Just like I will say, on the actual date of Purim, you can read Megillah by yourself. Af shelo bizmanam. So too, again, even not on the correct date, you can also read that in Megillah. Afilu biyachid. To which the Gemara says, Lo, the inyan mikra Megillah ba'asara. Mikra Megillah should always take place with a minyan. Ella my Erev Shabbos zmanam. What does it mean to say Erev Shabbos is their time? Lafuki mid the Rebbe, da amar hoil v'nitchu yitchu ayaros mimkomon. Hol v'nitchu ayaros mimkomon yitchu liyom haknisa. So both say, come to exclude the position of Rebbe. We just had Rebbe. Rebbe has this unique opinion that says, when the 14th falls out on Shabbos, what should you do, Rebbe say? What should you do? Push everyone. When I say everyone except walled cities, push everyone to where? Thursday. Kamash Malon, Erev Shabbos Baruch. So we don't pass in that way. And how? So we'll say, so two pieces of interesting halacha that come out. Number one, when the 14th falls out on Shabbos, we do not pass in like Rebbe. What we'll do when the 14th falls out on Shabbos is we'll push unwalled cities to Friday the 13th, villages to Thursday the 13th, although we saw the Rambam Paskins, we don't really have this halacha of villages anymore, but again, for our purposes, we'll push villages to the 13th, Thursday the 13th, and walled cities will read when? Sunday the 15th. Second halacha, Rabbosai, we paskin, we hold like really, ideally we hold like this, that we hold both like Rav and Ravasi, namely, you should always have a minyan when you read the Megillah. Right? That's the ideal. However, halacha l'maisa, one could be Yossi Mikra Megillah biyachid, and that is true even whether you're reading it on the ideal date, 14, 15, or whether you're reading on a deferred date, 11, 12, 13 as well. Good. Both say that, so that's those halachas. I'll just point out, I'm not going to go into it now because we'll have to say it for a different time. The interesting discussion about, we'll call it the bifurcation between reading of the Megillah and observance of Purim is an interesting idea. You know where this comes up most acutely? This comes up when the 15th falls out on Shabbos. This is like the most extreme case. When the 15th falls out on Shabbos, so I'll say, what happens when the 15th falls out on Shabbos? When does Yerushalayim observe Purim? If the 15th falls out on Shabbos? Right? On Friday. The interesting shaila is, when do they have Su'uda and Shalach Manas? So that, interesting enough, is a raging machlokes. So Shulchan Aruch seems to paskin, they have it on Sunday. But the Mishnah Berurah quotes opinions that no, they should actually observe it on Shabbos. Interestingly enough, right? So others say Friday, so that you get into a concept of what's called an halacha of a Purim Meshulash. You could get into a 3-day Purim idea. It's amazing. No one ever remembers Purim Meshulash. For good reason, right? So we'll say, so interesting. I'm just pointing out, we'll come to that case. I'm just pointing out this sugya of, again, dividing up, that it could be, I could have Mikra Megillah without the observance of Purim. We'll get to it. Says the Mishnah, so we just actually quoted this Mishnah in yesterday's daf. What is the definition of a large city? I was saying, I remember again, who cares what the definition of a large city is? Not large. No, it's very important. Remember, our categorizations are very important. Why? Because large unwalled cities always read when? On the 14th. Right? If you're not a large unwalled city, then what are you? A village. And if you're a village, then what? You can advance your reading to the nearest Yom HaKnisa. So these definitions are halachically important. So what is the definition of an ir gedola, of a large city? Says the Gemara Kol Sheish B'Asara Batlanin. Remember again, anyone, literally who has 10 people who are idle. But as we discussed in yesterday's Daf, and we'll see in today's Gemara, that's a reference to 10 people whose full-time occupation is to ensure that there is always a minyan in the shul. Pachos mikan, if you don't have Asara Batlanin, Harei Zekfar, then by definition you are a village. Be'elu amru, so says now the Mishnah switches gears. Be'elu amru makdimin v'lo ma'achrin. Now if you notice, by the way, interestingly enough, when it comes to Megillah, if you can't read on your normal date, what happens? What happens? You're pushed earlier, right? Which is very interesting. So remember again, you're never delayed. You're never delayed, right? We don't say, for example, if the 14th falls out on Shabbos, we don't say just read on the 15th on Sunday, right? We always push same idea. If the 15th falls out on Shabbos, we don't delay. That's for a different reason of a lo yavar. But lamaisa, again, by Mikra Megillah, when there's an issue with your natural date, we push you earlier. The Gemara says, just by the way, I just want to point out, that's not always the case in Halacha. Aval Zman Atzei Kohanim, but say a little bit of a throwback to Meseches Tainis, but ultimately, again, carbonates him. Look at Rashi. Aval Zman Atzei Kohanim Ba'am. Ha'omer Meseches Tainis. We missed Tainis. Tainis was a beautiful, beautiful Masechta. So, Shai Mishpachos Shal Yisrael Shakavot Lehem Yamim B'chol Shana Lahavi Eitzim LeMikdash L'Tzarach HaMa'aracha. Remember, again, there were certain families who had established dates to bring wood to the Beis HaMikdash, and when they would bring their wood, Umevian Karban Eitzim Iman, they would bring a special karban together with that wood. Im Chalios B'Shabbos. Let's say their date fell out on Shabbos. What happened? Me'acharin liyom machar. Ultimately, again, we delay their karban and the bringing of their wood to the next day. So if there's a conflict that the day of your karban Eitzim falls out on Shabbos, we push you to Sunday. What else do we push off? Tisha B'Av. If Tisha B'Av falls out on Shabbos, we push Tisha B'Av Zenitcha. We push it to Sunday. Chagiga, we'll finish this Rashi in just a moment. Karban Chagiga, right? If again, first day Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, and you want to bring it's really talking about your Ola Sriya. You want to bring your Ola or Chagiga, we'll say it's Machlokes in the Gemara. We push that off to Sunday. The Hakel. Hakel, I will say, is the massive gathering that takes place on the second night of Sukkot in the year following Shemitah, where the king would go ahead and read sections of the Torah to the entire people. If that falls out on Shabbos, in all of these cases, ma'acharin v'lo makdimin. We delay these things and we do not push them earlier. Well, so I go back to that Rashi for just a moment. In the middle of that Rashi, the Rashi Divrei HaMaschil, so Rashi says, Tisha B'Av, Mishum Duch B'Lutzar Yisrael. So skip down a little bit, I'm sorry. Chagiga, next Rashi. Imchal Yom Tov B'Shabbos, Dochin Shalmei Chagiga L'Machar. So I will say, if Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, we push off the Shalmei Chagiga. Now we'll discuss, if everybody agrees with this idea, Shalmei Chagiga are the shlamim, right, that are offered up on Yom Tov, that also provide meat for Yom Tov. We'll push that off, ultimately again, until Sunday. Rashi says Hakel. Rashi goes on there. So interestingly enough, why do we push off Hakel? So Rashi gives two reasons that's why I push off Hakel. Number one, because Hakel will say there is a mitzvah to bring even young children. So there's a concern potentially about carrying on Shabbos. Second possibility, says Tosas, is Hakel, they constructed a massive platform for the king to read from. So ultimately, again, the concern is if you do Hakel on Shabbos, that construction may inadvertently occur on Shabbos itself. Good. Two reasons for Hakel. Back to the Mishnah. So says the Gemara, Afa pisha amru makdimin v'lo ma'achrin, mutarin behesped ubetainis, umatanos la'avyonim. So I'll say interesting idea over here. What it seems to say is as follows. Teralocha l'maisa, when you, back to Megillah now, right? So we just said, when your natural date falls out on Shabbos, we'll advance your reading. By the way, the Gemara says, when we advance your reading, that day that you advanced your reading to, you're allowed to go ahead and deliver a hesped and eulogy on those days. In other words, what is that saying? When we advance the reading of the Megillah to a different date, halacha l'maisa, what are we doing? We're reading the Megillah on that date, but we're not transforming what? That date into Purim. Right? That date is not Purim. V'haraya, you're allowed to do things on that date that you're not allowed to do on Purim. Namely, deliver eulogies and fast. Umatanos Tavionim. Am Rabbi Yehuda, Masai, Makom Shenichas Hashem Chamishi. Rabbi Yehuda, by the way, when we speak about advancing the villages to the nearest Monday and Thursday, when is that true? When it's a village that comes into the larger cities on Mondays and Thursdays. Avamokom Shein Nichnasin. But if the villages don't come into the larger cities on Mondays and Thursdays, so the Gemara says, Lo, you're not allowed to advance the reading of the Megillah. So the Gemara says, Avamakom she'in nichnasan lo, Avamakom she'in nichnasan lo b'sheni v'lo b'chamishi in korin osa ela bizmana. So it's just an important halacha that the license to advance the reading for villages to the nearest Monday and Thursday is not just like a blanket rule for any village. It has to be a village that what? That is going into the larger cities on Mondays and Thursdays. Incredible. Says the Gemara Tana, Asara Batlan Shavei Saknesas. We just said this yesterday. When we speak about the 10 Batlanim, that doesn't just mean that there are 10 idle people. If that's the case, every city is a large city. But rather, you're going to say what it means is that halach lamaisa, these people are dafka on the communal payroll to ensure that there is a minyan for the shul at all times. So we'll say, we said again, Megillah is unique because Megillah, if there's a conflict with the date on Shabbos, will advance the reading of the Megillah. Yet halacha lamaisa, for many other things we will delay. So says the Gemara, my time, what's the reason? Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Shmuel, Amar Kra, V'lo Yavar. Because we'll say by Megillah it's a little bit different. Because by Megillah, the Megillah itself says V'lo Yavar, that it can't go past the 15th. It can't go past the 15th. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Shmuel, Minayin Shemon in Yom Neshana. So it's just a side idea. How do we know that it will say in general, we don't count days for the year? In other words, a year is made up of 12 months, right? And not made up of a certain number of days. This is talking about the lunar year as opposed to the solar year. Shne'emar l'chodshei hashana. Because the pasuk says for the months of the year, Chadashim atamona l'shanim v'atamona yamim l'shanim. We count months for the year. We don't count days for the year. V'rabbanon v'kisari mishum Rabbi Abba Amru Minay shemechashin sha'os l'chadashim. How do you know, Abosai, that months are made up of days and not made up of hours? Shene'emar ad chodesh yamim. Yamim ata mechashev l'chadashim v'ata mechashev sha'os l'chadashim. Ultimately, again, we go ahead and we count days for the month. Ultimately, again, we don't count hours for the month. Incredible. So we'll say that all these other things, we delay. If they conflict with Shabbos, we don't push them earlier. Says Gemara, why is that? So Tisha B'Av, akdume paranos lo mekadmi. We'll say at the end of the day, Tisha B'Av, we don't advance suffering. We don't advance suffering. So if I know that Tisha B'Av falls out on a Shabbos, the notion of bringing in Tisha B'Av earlier is counterintuitive, right? We don't advance suffering. Shabbos is such an interesting yesod, because if you think about it, don't advance suffering. It's not like Tisha B'Av is going anywhere, right? So in other words, like, I know I'm going to have to observe Tisha B'Av, so what does it matter if I observe it on Friday, observe it on Sunday? So we'll say it's an incredible hashkafas hachaim also. Like, a person knows in life that there are going to be difficult times. So there are some people who, because they know there are going to be difficult times, they are unable to enjoy any good times in life, right? They're always waiting for the shoe to drop. I know something terrible is going to happen at some point in time, which is true. Something terrible does happen at some point in time. That is the nature of life, the peaks and valleys of life. So some people are just always waiting for that to happen, and they're maktim paranusa. Maktim paranusa means I'm always like ushering in the difficult, what's going to happen next? And I will say, but yet the proper hashkafas hachayim is enjoy life when you can enjoy life. Do difficulties come? Absolutely, difficulties come. But lamaisa, find a way to maximize your simcha when you have it. So therefore, I will say, interesting from a hashkafic perspective, if there's a choice between bringing in Tisha B'Av earlier or later, what do? Push it off. Push it off. Because at least what that allows you to do is to maximize the simcha of now. I'm not ignoring Tisha B'Av. I know Tisha B'Av is going to come. But Lamaisa, if there's an opportunity to maximize another day of Simcha, take the opportunity to maximize present joy. Tisha B'Av will come, but take the opportunity to maximize present joy, and don't be makdim paranusa. Don't go ahead and bring the suffering or bring the difficulty any earlier. Incredible yisod. So the Gemara says, and what else? Chagiga, Tana, Chagiga v'chozman, Chagiga ma'achrin. So we'll say furthermore again, another Brayso. The Brayso says, the carbon chagiga and the zman, the time for chagiga, we delay. So says the Gemara, what does that mean? What does that mean? So the Gemara says, so Bishlam Chagiga, I understand Chagiga, the Mikla B'Shabbos Ma'achron Le. They both say if the first day of Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, I would normally bring my carbon Chagiga on the first day of Yom Tov. I'll delay it. But ultimately, again, says the Gemara, so the Mikla B'Shabbos Ma'achron Le L'Basar Shabbos. Ella, Zman Chagiga Mahi. But what does it mean that I should delay the Zman Chagiga? What does that phrase mean? So the Gemara what it means to say Chagiga b'Shabbos va'olas ri'afila b'Yamtiv. But what it means is like this. What it means is when the carbon Chagiga, right, when the first day of Yom Tov falls out on Shabbos, we don't even offer up the carbon Chagiga on Shabbos. And I remember again, the Chagiga is a shlamim, which means that there's meat in it for me. But remember again, on Shabbos, the only thing we offer up are karbanos that are absolutely must be offered up that day. The carbon chagiga, when can you offer it up? The next day of Yom Tov, as we'll see. The carbon chagiga actually could be offered up the entirety of Yom Tov. So there's not an urgency. I don't have to do it on Shabbos. Furthermore, Ola Asriya, Ola Asriya is a special Ola. Ola is a carbon that is totally consumed on the Mizbeach. So Rabbi say, Ola Asriya, you're not even allowed to offer up on the first day of Yom Tov, right? You can't offer up an Ola on Yom Tov, because according to the Sabina, as we'll see, the only type of karbanos you could offer up on Yom Tov are what? The type of karbanos that you could consume. If you could eat it. If you can get meat from it, you could offer it. If you can't get meat from it, you can't offer it. So the Gemara says, whose opinion is this? Beis Shammai. Here we go. Tisnan Beishai Omrim, Mevi'en Shlom B'Yom Tov, Bein Slom Ch'naleyen, Avalo Olos. Beis Shammai says that Allah L'Maisa, you could bring shlomim on Yom Tov. Rabbi say, why can you bring a carbon shlom on Yom Tov? Why? Because you get to eat from that. Remember again, shlomim has three parts. There's a part that's burned on the Mizbeach, a part that goes to the Kohanim, and a part that comes to me, the owner. That's where I get my meat from Yom Tov from the shlomim. So therefore I could offer up a shlom on Yom Tov, but I don't do smicha. Remember we spoke about this. Smicha, the leaning on the animal, that's considered to be ishtamshus and bali chayim, that's considered to be usage of animals. We don't do that on Shabbos. Or Yom Tov, I should say. Avalo olos. But interestingly enough, Beis Shammai holds you can't offer up an ola even on Yom Tov, right? Because Beis Shammai is of the opinion that the only karbanos you could offer up on Yom Tov are karbanos that what? Karbanos that what? That give you meat, that provide you with food. Beis Hillel say no. Mevi'in shlomim va'olos. Beis Hillel disagrees, Rabbi say, and Beis Hillel says that on Yom Tov you are allowed to bring any Yom Tov centric karban, even if what? Even if it's an ola. So the Gemara says, and furthermore, you could also do smicha. Rava Amarava says, chagiga, kolzman chagiga, ma'achar in tfei lo. But says Rava says, chagiga, by the way, you have the entire Yom Tov to offer up your carbon chagiga. Entire Yom Tov. But no more than the entire Yom Tov. This is not because we learn. Listen to this. Mishalo chag. B'Yom Tov Arishon Shel Chag. Rabbi says someone who did not go ahead and celebrate on the first day of Sukkot. Now, when we say celebrate, it means you didn't bring your carbon chagiga. No problem. Holech es kol haregel kulo B'Yom Tov Achron Shel Chag. You could bring your carbon chagiga. Rabbi say when the entire Yom Tov, including what? Shmini Atzeres. Avar regel v'lo chag. Rabbi say if the Yom Tov goes ahead, if the Yom Tov goes ahead and you did not go ahead and celebrate, you didn't bring carbon chagiga. Ultimately, again, you're done. Which I will say also, what a beautiful metaphor for life. Let's say, take advantage of the opportunity to be besimcha in life, right? There's time, if you're not besimcha today, you'll be besimcha tomorrow. But at a certain point in time, if you don't take advantage of the opportunities to find simcha in life, enechai b'achriyusa means you can't make it up. In other words, you can make up the simcha of today, tomorrow, maybe even an entire Yom Tov. But at a certain point in time, if you don't take advantage of the opportunities to be happy, I'm supposed to say, happiness is a choice. Happiness is a choice. And if you don't take advantage of the opportunities to be besimcha in life, at a certain point, the opportunities are gone. Ravashi says, chagiga v'chozman chagiga ma'achrin. Va'afilu atzeres techadom achrin. What's very interesting. Ravashi says, in general, carbon chagiga, you have the entire Yom Tov. Ma'achrin means you could delay it. I mean, you have the entire Yom Tov to go ahead and offer it up. But we'll say, not only that, even Atzeres, remember again, Atzeres is Shavuos. Even Shavuos has a makeup date for the carbon chagiga. Because after all, we learned, we'll say, watch this. So the Gemara says, Disnan, Modim, Shimchal Atzeres Leos V'Shabbos. If Shavuos fell out on Shabbos, what's the halacha? Sheyom Tevoach Achar HaShabbos. Ultimately, again, that you could slaughter the carbon chagiga on Sunday. But do you one better? Interestingly enough, right? Shavuos, actually, according to many opinions, actually has what? 7 days of tashlumin afterwards, which is quite amazing, right? We know this because it's one of everyone's favorite halachas, which is tachnun, right? That's why, again, many don't say tachnun for the 7 days after Shavuos as well, because that's tashlumin. Interesting idea. Good. Let's go weiter. Rebbe Natan Netibram, watch this. Rebbe planted a tree, right? Or I should say he planted something on Purim, Amud Beis. Not only that, he bathed in the spring. All right, Bikrona Shal Tzipori, or I should say in the marketplace of Tzipori. Rashi says Biyom Shuk Befarhesia. Right, he went ahead and he bathed on Shivasar B'Tammuz. Ubikesh La'akar Tisha B'Av, and Rebbe wanted to uproot the observance of Tisha B'Av. Incredible. V'lo hodulo. But ultimately, again, it's they did, but the other Rabbanim did not agree with him. Now Rashi says, Dafka, they didn't agree with him with Tisha B'Av. So it sounds like they were okay that he planted a tree or he planted something on Purim and that he bathed on Shivasar B'Tammuz, but they were not okay with his desire to uproot Tisha B'Av, as we'll get to in just a moment. So the Gemara says, so Amr the son of Rabbi Abba Bar Zabda, Rabbi lo kach hayamaisa, ela Tisha B'Av shechalios b'Shabbos hava, No. Rebbe didn't want to go ahead and just simply uproot Tisha B'Av. What was the case? The case was Tisha B'Av that fell out on Shabbos. And what happened? Va'amar Rebbe, hoil v'nidche yidche. Rebbe said, look, what are we doing? We're gonna observe a nidche Tisha B'Av, right? A delayed Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is the 9th of Av. If you can't do it, you can't do it. Right? So Rebbe says, once we're going in and we're delaying it, maybe for this year, let's just forego it. And what happened? The Chacham did not agree with this idea, and Rebbe accepted it. Kari alei, tovim ashnayim min ha'echad. Two are better than one. In other words, I will say that Rebbe ultimately, again, that Rebbe wanted to go ahead and simply uproot a Tisha B'Av that was nidche. Now, Tosas has a whole discussion over which we're not going to get into now. Tosas has a whole discussion. How could you have a Havamina that Rebbe wanted to go ahead and uproot Tisha B'Av? Ain based in right. One court cannot uproot something that was legislated by another court. Less the court's called Chacham Minyan. Tosas has this idea that what Rebbe wanted to do was to uproot the severity of Tisha B'Av. To uproot the severity of Tisha more than other Taniyos. Fine. The idea over here is, so first of all, a number of interesting ideas. The Rebbe just, according to the Gemara, wanted to do away with the concept of a nidcha. He just did not feel that once you're not observing Tisha B'Av on the 9th of Av, there's no point in doing the fast. The rabbis argued back against him, and Rebbe was makabel. But I see two things from here. Number one, tov mashayim min ha'echad, how good it is to have a chavrusa, and how good it is to surround yourself by the right people and the right influences, because a lot of times in life, the hashkafas and the ideas that we think are correct in our personal echo chamber are often not correct. And you go through life with flawed hashkafas and flawed yedias and flawed outlooks, which is why a person has to surround themselves with the right people to help them develop the right hashkafas in life. That's number one. But say number two, be a makabel. Right? Be a makabel. That I have to work on being someone who accepts things from others. See, I both say, no one really likes to be wrong. Right? No one likes to be wrong. But the shaila is, when it's pointed out to me that I'm incorrect, there are two different approaches. Some people just dig in. They dig in even further because they will do anything not to be wrong. Or I could work on being a makabel. And I will say, being a makabel, it's hard. For many of us, it's hard because I want to be right? And I feel that I should be right. But Lamaisa, being a makabel, accepting from others when I am wrong and being willing to pivot, like we spoke about before, is such an incredible midah. And if Rebbe could do it, we can certainly do it as well. So the Gemara goes back there. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Hechi not in the Teva Purim. But one second, let's go back for just a moment. We're focusing on Tisha B'Av. How was Rabbi able to plant a tree on Purim? After all, Vatani Rav Yosef, Simcha u'mishte v'yamtiv. The pasuk in the Megillah says that Purim is a day of Simcha, joy, Mishte, celebration, and Yamtiv. What do we learn from this? Simcha, Melamed Shasurim Behesped. So we'll say from the word Simcha we learn, we don't deliver eulogies on Purim. Right? Mishte teaches me Melamed Sha'asar B'tainis. You're not allowed to fast on Purim. V'yamtiv, what does Yamtiv teach me? Melamed Sha'asar B'asiyas Malacha. You're not allowed to work on Purim. Right? The most of it is an Isra Malacha on Purim. So how is Rebbe planting a tree? Ella Rebbe bar arbeisar havar v'chinata b'chameisar nata. You're right. But Rebbe was a 14er, right? Rebbe lived in an unwalled city, so he celebrated Purim on the 14th. And when when they said Rebbe planted a tree on Purim, which Purim? The 15th, which wasn't his Purim. So I said, really? Vaha Rebbe b'Tiveria hava u'Tiveria mukefes chomos Yeshua benun havi. Was Rebbe lived in Tiveria? And Tiveria was a walled city. So what are you talking about? Okay, fine. El Rebbe bar chameisar havar v'chinata bar beisar havar. Fine, okay, it doesn't matter. Just switch it, right? Rebbe observed Purim on the 15th, and when we say that Rebbe planted a tree on Purim, when did he plant? On the 14th. So it's called Purim, but what? It wasn't his Purim. 1 second. First of all, the Gemara says, Umi pshitale de Tiveria mukefes chomos Yeshua benun hava. So first of all, does everybody agree that Tiveria was a walled city in the times of Yoshua ben Nun? V'achizkiya kari b'Tiveria ba'ar beisar u'bechameisar miseka misapkale imukefes chomos Yoshua ben Nun ilo. But yet, ultimately, read the Gemara said Chizkiya observed Purim both on the 14th and the 15th in Tiveria because he was unsure was Tiveria a walled city or not. To which the Gemara says, fine. L'chizkiya misapkale l'rei pshitale. That was a great line, right? So Chizkiya had a suffix. Rebbe didn't have a suffix. Rebbe knew that Tiveria was a walled city, therefore he observed Purim on the 15th, and when it says that he planted a tree on Purim, when did he plant it? On the 14th. So the Gemara says, 1 second. So I'll say, you're presupposing that if you observe Purim on one day, that other day, that is also Purim, but not your Purim, is mutar b'asiyas malacha. So the Gemara says, v'chi pshitale mishari. So the Gemara says, Vaksim Megillas Tainis. Listen to this. We learn in Megillas Tainis. Es Yom Arba'asar v'es Yom Chamishasar Yomei Purya Inun. So Rabbi said, this is a culture of Megillas Tainis. Remember again, Megillas Tainis contains all of the days which are Yomim Tovim, which you're not allowed to fast on, or for that matter, deliver hesped on. So the Megillas Tainis says, the 14th and the 15th of Adar are the days of Purim. Delola mispad behon, you can't eulogize on them. And I will say, ultimately, what does it teach you? Va'amarava, lo nitzrucha ela la'asor es shel zeh bazeh, ve'es shel zeh bazeh. We'll say, what does that teach us? The Megillah Tainis teaches us that whatever is restricted on the 14th is restricted on the 15th, and whatever is restricted on the 15th is restricted on the 14th. In other words, you can't fast, you can't deliver eulogies, and it sounds like what else can't you do? You can't do malacha. If that's the case, how could Rebbe plant a tree on the 14th, even if halacha l'maisi he observed Purim on the 15th? Jabal says it's incredible. The Gemara says, Hani miliv has the Tainis. You're right. This applies to fasting and to eulogies. Jabal said, we don't fast and we don't deliver eulogies both on the 14th and the 15th. Ava malacha yom echad v'sulo. Jabal said the Isra malacha only applies on which day? On which day? On the day you observe Purim. On the day you observe Purim. But halacha l'maisi not on the other day. Ini, is that so? Vaha Rav Chazi lahu garva deka shadi kisna bepuria velatye velot samach kisna. But yet Rav saw a man who was sowing flax on Purim. Rav cursed the growth, or cursed the man, and ultimately the flax did not grow. To which the Gemara said, what's the kasha? Hasam bar yomahava. The guy was planting flax when? On the day he observed Purim. It's not a kasha. He planted flax on the day he was observing Purim. So ultimately, again, Rav said, you're not allowed to do that. To which the Gemara says, Afilu tema biyomei. So I will say, the truth is, let's go back. It could even be that what? It could even be that Rav was planting the tree on the day that he observed Purim. It's even possible. So the Gemara says, rather, Hesped v'tainis kiblu alayu, melacha lo kabil alayu. We both say, this is fascinating. The Gemara wants to make the following suggestion. Everyone agrees that Hesped and Tainis is going to be Asr on Purim, right? In both days, 14 and 15. Can't deliver, usually you can't fast. I will say work, interestingly enough, is dependent on minhag hamakom. Not everyone accepted an Ister Malacha prohibition to work on Purim. Now, where does this come from? We'll say this is fascinating. Watch this. The Meikar Ksiv, Sirabo say in the beginning, when the Megillah speaks about the creation of the Yom of Purim, so the pasuk says, Simcha u'mishta v'yamtiv. Right? The Moshe says these three phrases, Simcha, Mishta, Yamtiv. And remember, again, we said, Simcha, right, Mishta, and Yamtiv teaches me Isra Malacha. Ulabasov ksiv lasos osam yimei mishta v'simcha ve'ilu yomtiv lo ksiv. Shabbos say this is incredible. Yet in the final formulation of Purim is described as a day of mishta, a day of simcha, but what's not included? Yomtiv. Shabbos say, what do you see from here? You see that the Isra Malacha, the prohibition not to do work, was a minhag that some communities accepted and other communities did not. So ve'ela Rav my time alachi elu gava. So we'll say, let's go back for a second. If that's the case, then why did Rav curse the flax guy? Right? The guy was sowing flax on Purim. Okay, he was doing malacha, but you see, not everybody was makabel the Isra Malacha. So why did Rav curse him? Listen to this. So the Gemara says, I'll tell you why. Because halacha l'maisa, in the city where this guy was living, the minhag hamakom was what? Not to do malacha. Shabbosai, you can't go ahead and flaunt the minhag hamakom. The minhag hamakom. In other words, if you live in a place, if you live in a locale where there's a particular standard of conduct, you have to live in conformance with those rules. So this guy was flagrantly violating the minhag hamakom, and therefore halacha l'maisa, that's why Rav cursed him. So the Gemara says as follows. Good. V by Sema. So we'll say, therefore, by the way, I'm sorry, Uba Asre Rebbe Lo Nog. And I will say, just kind of circling back. I say, how was Rebbe able to plant the tree on Purim? The answer is simple. What's the answer? Where Rebbe lived, the minhag hamakom was not to abstain from halacha. That's it. So the Gemara says, 1 second. V by Sema the Olam Nog. It could very well be, I will say, that even in the place of Rebbe, even in Rebbe's city, they were careful not to do malacha on Purim. If that's the case, then how did Rebbe plant the tree? Watch this. The Rebbe netiya shel simcha nata. This is beautiful, Moshe. Rebbe didn't plant any tree. He planted what we call a netiya shel simcha, right? A plant of joy, right? A planting of joy. Kiddush, I will say, tinus. We just had this. Avru elu ve'elu, right? Avru elu v'lo nanu. If the set of fast days go by and we still don't have rain, mema'atin b'maso umatan b'binyinu menetiya b'ne'erisim b'nisuin. We decrease business dealings. We decrease building, planting, erisin and nisuin. V'tanala, and we said, by the way, what kind of building do you decrease? Binyan shel simcha. Netiya shel simcha. What do we decrease? We'll say we decrease building of simcha and planting of simcha. So we'll say, what's building of simcha? So Rashi says over here, binyan amar kan shasur binyan shal simcha shnogin asman kin zufin avin. So we'll see we'll read the next Rashi in just a moment. So the Gemara says, I'm sorry, it's in the Gemara. Ezo binyan shal simcha, first wide line. They will say, what is an example of binyan shal simcha? Zehabona beis chasnos libino. We'll say, this is a person who built a beis chasnos. So we'll say, this is actually a beautiful idea. It's the end of Rashi Nitiya. Rashi says, binyan beis chasnos libno kishemasi isha libno harishon hayabona lo bayis. So say, apparently this was a custom that people, when they married off their oldest child, their oldest son, what would you do? I will say, actually, I happen to think we should bring this one back. This is great. Listen to this. They would build a house for the son. I was supposed to say, instead of going in and spending tens and thousands of dollars on a wedding celebration, it's a down payment for a house. Now, what's the chap? Right? The chap is, the chasana is where? In the house, which significantly diminishes your guest list. Right? So whoever you go ahead and you could fit in the house, you're invited to the chasana. Now, let's say, but on a serious note, what an incredible use of resources, right? Instead of spending tens of thousands of dollars on a 4-hour event, go ahead and channel those resources towards something that is going to be around, right, the next morning as well. So that's beis chasnus libno, right? That's ultimately, again, the house of the chasana for my children. So the Gemara says, so again, I just want to point out, so by Tainus, when they would not have rain, they would diminish building of simcha. What's ezu netiyah shel simcha? We'll say, what's an netiyah shel simcha? Zanotea abornoki shel malachim. This is a person who plants the abornoki shel malachim, the abornoki or the abornoki of kings. What is that? If you look at Rashi, Rashi says, netiyah ha'amura kan netiyah shel simcha kigon abornoki ilan shetzilo noeh. So we'll say the abornoki was a tree that gave off beautiful shade. Kigon ilan shekovafin osa gabe klenusa Medusos v'Yesedos. V'Malachim ochlin tachtav b'mos hachana u'mis'adnin ba b'minei smachos. So Rabbi said, listen to this. So apparently the Abranuki was a tree that had long branches. And what they used to do is they would snake the branches over poles or over a, what do you call that thing? That people build, they put their sukkah on it also. A trellis? Pergola, right? So a trellis or a pergola, whatever. But the idea is you go ahead and you snake the branches over it, and it provides shade. So I will say this was called the Netiyah Shel Simcha. So first of all, interesting. Why is it called the Netiyah Shel Simcha? Because it provides shade for people to sit in. Right? The greatest simcha is when you go ahead and you create something that could benefit someone else aside from yourself. That's simcha. So the Gemara says, just to come full circle, we have to stop. So the Gemara says that halacha l'maisa, that when Rebbe planted something on Purim. So first of all, let's analyze the case. How is Rebbe planting on Purim? So let's go through this. How is Rebbe planting on Purim? So possibility number one is what? Is that in Rebbe's locale, they never adopted the minhag of Isra Malacha. Right? That's possibility number one. Because remember, we reject all the other ones. It can't be that he's on the 50th, it's the 14th, because it sounds like whatever you're observing on one day, you're observing the other day also. So it could be that Allah Chalamaisa, they just did, with Rebbe's locale, they didn't accept Isra Malacha. That's possibility one. Possibility two is no, they accepted Isra Malacha. But even so what? He was still allowed to plant the tree. Why? Because that's called Netiyah Shel Simcha. That it's possible that even if you go ahead and you accept an Isra Malacha applies to what we'll call normative, everyday Malacha. But special Malacha Shel Simcha, the planting of this kind of tree, which is going to be Mahana, going to benefit others, that would be permitted on Purim as well. So stop over here. Shkoyach, I think we are now officially caught up with the Daf Yomi cycle. Shkoyach. Close enough. Amen.